if you're a woman, be glad you weren't born a pig. Because if you were, you would be put into a cage. You would spend your entire life in a cage so small that you couldn't stand up, stretch your legs, or even turn around. In that cage, where you would spend the entirety of your life, you would be forced to, you'd be forcefully inseminated, and you'd be forced to breed litter after litter of piglets. You would never have any contact with your children outside of this cage. They would allow you to nurse your children from in between the steel bars of this cage, and when they got big enough, they would take them away from you. Your daughters to become breeding sows like yourself, your sons to become the bee and a BLT. If you're a man, be glad that you weren't born a chicken, because if you were, and you were born on an egg farm, you would be put onto a gigantic conveyor belt immediately after you were hatched. And on this conveyor belt, they would sort you by gender, and if you were unfortunate enough to be born with a penis, or the unfortunate enough to not be able to produce eggs, they would throw you down a gigantic chute. And at the bottom of the chute, to break your fall, would be a gigantic blender. I am not exaggerating. A gigantic blender that would immediately pulverize you. Because it's an egg farm and you can't produce eggs, so it's just cheaper to blend you up into pulp than to keep you around. There are currently about 7 billion human beings on planet Earth. About 107 billion have ever existed. And I only bring that up because, for comparison's sake, 60 billion animals, that is, yes, 60 billion, are killed by humans per year for food. Per year. So that means in less than 2 years, you have more death suffered in the animal kingdom than you have in the entirety of human history. And I think that you could very easily make the case that more suffering happens cumulatively by animals over just a few years than humans have ever suffered. And believe me, the descriptions I gave before are not exaggerations. If anything, I'm understating. It is truly horrific. So the talk is going to perk up in a minute. I like to start it on a serious note, just as a reminder that this is a really serious issue. And that the debate about vegetarianism, it's not a debate about diet. And it isn't a debate about lifestyle, and it isn't a debate about aesthetics. It's a debate about ethics. It's a debate about ethics with life or death consequences. And it's a debate that every single person in this room is involved in. Every single person in this room has the ability to do something about. So that's why I like to bring it off serious. I'm going to stop my fire and brimstone preaching now. That being said, I could do it all night. So this is called a libertarian case for vegetarianism. But realistically, I don't think that there's anything special to libertarianism that's kind of conducive to vegetarianism. I kind of think that, like with libertarian ethics, vegetarian ethics are pretty basic and pretty universally held, whether or not people kind of realize it or apply it to their lives or not. And I think that libertarian ethics and vegetarian ethics are the same thing. Libertarians are just better at realizing it. I think everybody in this room is a really deeply ethically concerned person. If you weren't, you wouldn't be spending your Wednesday night listening to a 20-something lecture you about eating meat. You wouldn't come to Liberty on the Rocks if you weren't really morally inclined people. And everybody in this room has spent time debating, thinking about morality and how it applies to them. How they can take morality and use it to live a more moral life. So, like I said, I don't think that there's anything special to libertarianism. That being said, libertarians have just kind of happened to be at the forefront of giving fringe groups rights. Whether it be kind of early libertarians like Lysander Spooner, giving some of the most beautiful, eloquent, and convincing arguments against slavery a few hundred years ago, or whether it be the Libertarian Party right here in Denver at its inception in the 1970s, being one of the first, if not the first party, major political party in America to openly support gay marriage. So libertarians have had this really beautiful history of being at the forefront of giving liberty, freedom, and rights to historically disenfranchised groups. And I think that animals are just one step in kind of a line of many unfortunate cases that libertarians get to in 50 years say, yeah, well, we've thought that for a long time. Congratulations on catching up. So the question is kind of, so what are libertarian ethics? And I think you can kind of anecdotally sum it up in one sentence: don't hurt people and don't take their shit. But to kind of go deeper into that, you can kind of go, well, we have two kind of basic principles, right? The self-ownership principle, which pretty just simply states that, you know, I control my own body. I own me, you own you, I don't own you, you don't own me. It kind of stems from this kind of natural physiology we have where you are the only person that kind of controls your meat, right? You're the only person inside your head, presumably. You're the only person that can kind of make yourself do things, and that means that you and you alone are kind of the owner of yourself, of your actions, of your labors, of your pains, of your pleasures, and that nobody else owns you. This is a thing I've never heard anybody object to. And the second principle, which I think is kind of equally as basic, is the non-aggression principle, or the NAP, or what I kind of like just to call is just the idea of anti-violence. And that's, again, the very uncontroversial idea that it's morally wrong to initiate violence on somebody who's never done anything to you. Right? So if somebody's done you no harm, it's wrong to hurt them. Right? It's pretty basic, right? Like, again, this is something I never hear anybody object to. And I think that with these two things alone, libertarians derive the majority of their philosophy. And with these two principles alone, I think vegetarians derive the majority of their philosophy. So the question then becomes, what is it about animals that these two principles don't apply? So self-ownership and the NAP are things that we apply to literally every single human being on the planet. All 7 billion of them, every single person here in this room thinks that they are covered under these two principles, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, regardless of their anything, regardless of whether they're a good person, regardless of whether they're ethical. We still think that they deserve, that they own their own bodies, and that you shouldn't hurt them unless they hurt you. So the question is, why the hell don't we extend these two very fundamental principles to animals? I've never, in my 6 years of being a vegetarian, I've never heard a good answer to this. That being said, I'm just, because I know I'm going to get them in the questions, I'm going to go over kind of like the 5 best ones I've ever heard. So kind of the first and most obvious I ever get is, well, it's something to do with intelligence, right? People are clearly much more intelligent than animals, and that somehow this gives us the right to kill and eat them. Which, you know, that's fine. Again, this is one I hear really, really commonly. But the problem kind of starts to emerge when we universalize this, when we kind of think, well, what does this look like as an ethical principle? And it goes something like this. It's morally permissible to kill and eat X, provided that you are more intelligent than it. And I'm kind of hoping that when I put it that way, a lot of people in this room are kind of already starting to see why this might be problematic, right? So the question is like, so what are we talking about more intelligent? Are we talking about 1 IQ point? Are we talking about 50? Are we talking about 70? Where do you draw the line? I know we have some incredibly intelligent people in this room. I'd imagine that we have some people in here, you know, with incredibly high IQs. So we could even like really make it a big distinction. Let's just say our threshold for intelligence is 2 times. If you're 2 times as intelligent as something, they're just inferior to you and it's okay to eat them. So I'd imagine we have some people in here with IQs approaching 2 or even surpassing 140. Would it be morally acceptable, giving this as your moral criteria, and D. Brandon Dassey from Making a Murderer, a man with an IQ of 70, a man who can just barely function in society? Would that be okay? If you think that intelligence is the only thing that kind of exempts animals from the NAP, then the answer is yes, but it really seems like, no, like it doesn't matter if he's not as intelligent as you, like he still owns himself, and it doesn't give you a reason to hurt him. And so you can kind of keep making this bridge wider and wider until you get to like the point where you have somebody who's so mentally handicapped that there are animals that are significantly more intelligent than them. And you just kind of see that this argument kind of falls apart. Like intelligence should not be relevant in whether you should have the right to kill something. So kind of the next step I hear people, okay, well maybe it's not intelligence, maybe it's species, right? So again, we can universalize this and go, it's morally permissible to kill and eat X provided that they are of a different species than you. Which again, I mean, it's common, but it seems okay, but doesn't that seem a little arbitrary? I mean, I didn't have any say in being born human. Animals didn't have any say in being born in their species. Why should it matter? Why is that morally relevant? What's really interesting is that for a long time, kind of in human evolution, there were several different types of humanoids walking the earth. There were Homo sapiens, which is what we are, walking around with Neanderthals and Homo habilis and Homo... I don't want to say that there were just a bunch of different types of homos walking around, but there were. And they all ended up going extinct, but we can kind of easily imagine a different evolutionary trajectory where you kind of have a butterfly effect, something didn't happen, and we still have like Neanderthals walking around with us. So they'd be a different species than us, and they could be here in this room. Would it be okay to eat them? They're a different species. I mean, if that's your moral criterion, it seems like that would be permissible, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, like they'd be very human. So species alone doesn't really seem to be a relevant factor. What if they were the same, different species and really unintelligent? What if they were a different species, really unintelligent, and tasted great? It still doesn't seem like it would give you the right to eat them, right? So then it just kind of seems like, well, the only difference between like a Neanderthal that has all those things, like looks different species, less intelligent, tastes good, and a pig is just appearance. One looks more like you than the other. And when you kind of realize that that's the only criteria you're making your moral choices on, it seems really shallow. It's like, I think it's okay to kill and eat things just because they look different than me. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to, is that we just can't empathize with them as well. Again, so we can kind of then combine intelligence and species, right? So we can go, well, okay, but maybe, different species and much significantly less intelligent. And to that I say, imagine that, the star that people think that there might be like an alien megastructure surrounding. Let's say that they're right, and that there is an alien megastructure floating around some distant star, and they come to Earth. And they are way more advanced than us, like way more advanced. They're infants, have a firm grasp on quantum mechanics and differential equations, and like they're mentally handicapped or better than our like best and brightest. And they come over to Earth and go like, golly, these guys look tasty. I think I'm gonna have me some of those. And you ask them like, well, what's your reasoning? And they go, well, we think violence is wrong when we do it to each other, but you guys look different than us. You're significantly less intelligent than us, and you're a different species. So we're gonna eat you. Who here would have an issue with that? Who here would like say, like, I'm sorry, Mr. Alien, like, I really don't give a shit. Like, this is not good enough. Like, if I have any say in this, you're not allowed to eat me. I don't care. So why is this any different than animals? I can't think of a difference. So the kind of final one I hear is, well, people can, right? People have this master, this dominion over nature and all the other animals. And I say animals in the sense that non-human animals. We shouldn't forget that people are animals. We're just animals with shoes and cell phone plans, but we are animals with thumbs. Big fucking deal. Yeah. So we can't forget that we're animals. So the question becomes, well, we can eat them, right? I hear this argument a lot, but I really hope that this argument won't be convincing to anybody in this room. Because it's ostensibly a might makes right argument. It is bully logic, it's status logic, it's just because I can do something means that I should.
Boo status.
Boo status. And I think that if that argument is convincing to anybody, I'm terribly sorry, this is Liberty on the Rocks, Libertarian networking group. The Donald Trump for President rally is across the street. So I hope that I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that nobody thought that was a good argument in the first place. I only bring it up because every jar-headed, buzz-cutted, that they always bring that up. The Donald Trump joke is less effective on them. So there's a philosopher out in Boulder by the name of Michael Huemer. Yeah, there we go.
Mike Huber, baby!
I know. He's a really hard professor. He's spoken actually right here where I am speaking now about a bunch of different stuff. And he's kind of got this really interesting ethical theory that I'm going to obscenely oversimplify for you right now. That he basically says that humans kind of have built in this kind of ethical intuition, right? We kind of have this voice in our head that's a pretty good judge of what is morally right and what's morally wrong. So, be honest, show of hands, who was brave enough to watch the slaughterhouse videos I posted on Facebook last night? 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so the people, who's ever seen like slaughterhouse footage? Did you like it? Like, could you watch it for more than 10 seconds?
It got me aroused.
I don't know if I can help Justin.
Yeah,
No.
Hey, it's
Justin meets special.
Hey, come on.
It tastes good.
But she takes Bitcoin.
Can anybody, I don't want to make any assumptions about anybody in this room, but I don't think anybody in here is a psychopath. And I think that that's about what it takes to watch that and be able to see it for more than 10 seconds without wanting to vomit. If you haven't seen these undercover videos and you eat meat, I think you should watch it. At the very least, you have a moral obligation to know where the sausage, how the sausage is made. And trust me, if you weren't a vegetarian now, you're going to be. It's so awful. So, going back to Michael Huemer's argument, we have this really strong moral intuition about eating meat, and that is, oh dear God, what the hell is this? I can't watch this. Like, please turn it off. And that tells us something about morality, right? The fact that every fiber in our body is saying, like, I don't want to see this, tells us, like, pretty strongly that what we're seeing is probably wrong. And the question I put forth to you is, what else in society do we have that we can't even watch a video of? That we still... 2 girls, 1 cup. That we still financially support every single day, 3 times a day, and think about when we're eating. Is there anything that like you'd be just too afraid to watch a video of, but then immediately go and pay for 3 times a day every day of your life?
Legal system, damn taxes.
Yeah, well, you aren't forced to. Nobody here is forced to eat meat, presumably. There's nothing, right? So it seems like our entire moral intuition is telling us that, like, this is not only wrong, this is just wrong on a cosmic scale. But we still do it. So the only thing I kind of hear to this is like, well, yeah, Patrick, like, I've seen the videos, I threw up, I cried, and then I ate a cheeseburger. And the only reason why people can do this is because we have this weird fetishization and, like, kind of privileging of our sense of taste that we don't really have with our other senses. So, for example, let's say, you know, you're undressing and you catch a peeping Tom looking at you. And, you know, you're able to catch him and accost him and go like, hey, what the hell, what you're doing is wrong, don't do that. And he says like, yeah, I know, like, it's wrong, I've seen videos of it, I don't like it, but God, like, I really like looking at it. And, you know, I do it every day, I do it 3 times a day, my parents did it. They brought me up to do it, I really like it, and, like, I don't really want to stop. I just like looking at it. Would that fly?
Hence the porn industry.
Hence the porn industry. But would any of you go like, oh, okay, like, on your way? Like, you're like, no, screw you. Like, I don't care how much you like looking. I don't care how much pleasure you get from, like, your viewing. Like, it doesn't matter. And it's kind of the same way with, like, when you see these videos. Like, well, I don't care, like, how much you enjoy tasting stuff. Like, if everything in your body is saying that this is wrong, and it probably is, and, like, you probably shouldn't, you know, financially support it. Right? So, it may seem like a really big jump, what I'm saying, a big jump to take these principles that you apply to people and apply them to animals. Like I said, you already apply them to literally every single person on the planet, regardless of any factor. But I'm here to tell you it's really not as big of a jump as you think. In fact, it's not even principles that you just apply to people, it's principles that you apply to animals. I'm just asking that you take these principles that you apply to people and animals and apply them to the rest of animals. Because you already do apply these principles to animals. You apply them to your dog, you apply them to your cat, you apply them to dolphins and tigers and Cecil the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Realistically, the only animals that our society thinks is like acceptable to eat, they're only like 5 or 6. So realistically, a vegetarian is only somebody who eats 5 or 6 fewer animals than you do as a meat eater. Everybody else, you still think that the NAP applies. Everybody else you still think has self-ownership. We are all appalled when somebody eats a monkey. We're all appalled when a fat-ass dentist kills a lion. We're all appalled at these things. Well, what's the difference with pigs? They're less intelligent, maybe. They actually are smarter than dogs, but we've already decided that intelligence isn't a good enough factor. It doesn't matter what their IQ is, they still have a right to life. So what is it? That we just have like kind of these 5 or 6 exemptions to the NAP. It's not even a lot of them. It's literally like 5 or 6. So I've got one of my favorite kind of thought experiments. It comes from just, weirdly enough, another philosopher in Boulder. And this argument is one of my favorite and was kind of one of the more convincing when I stopped eating meat. And I put it forth to you now. Imagine, so somebody give me like what's your favorite type of food? It can be meat or not meat.
Steak.
Steak? All right.
Bacon.
Bacon.
Salmon.
What? Sog? Salmon? If anybody says gin, I love you.
It's like a green.
Sog paneer. Yeah, I love sog paneer. All right. Yeah, let's go with sog.
Use bacon.
Use bacon. Sure, bacon.
Everyone loves bacon.
Even my dog loves bacon.
Not me. I don't love bacon. I like pigs. So imagine you're in a, you're driving along I-70 and you're in a terrible, terrible accident. And you're lucky enough to walk out of this accident unscathed, but the only kind of negative consequence is you lose the ability to taste bacon. And it was a really weird accident, you landed on your tongue wrong. It was a really weird accident, but that's kind of the, yeah, or brain damage. But it's like the only, you're fine other than you lose the ability to taste bacon. Let's say you love bacon. It is your favorite thing, you eat it every single day, regardless of the fact that it's gonna kill you in your 40s. You eat it every day, you love it. And now imagine that, after a few months of just hating life without bacon, a guy, I always imagine the Rick from Rick and Morty, a mad scientist comes up to you and says like, hey, I heard you're that guy that can't taste bacon. Well, what do you know? I've got this miracle pill. And it will give you the ability to taste bacon again. And you're like, hot damn, give me the pills. And he gives them to you, and lo and behold, it fixes your problem. You can taste bacon again. In fact, it makes all food taste better. You go out to the supermarket, you buy all the bacon you can, you binge, you stuff yourself, you gorge yourself, just to a crazy degree. And you do this for the next couple of weeks until you run out. And you go back to Rick Sanchez or Doc from Back to the Future, whichever mad scientist you're picturing of. And tell him, hey Doc, I ran out of pills, can I get some more? And he says, yes, but I have to make them first. So you're like, groovy, all right. And so he takes you down to his basement, and in his basement you kind of see his walls are lined with kind of surgical equipment, kind of medieval torture device-looking things. I'm kind of getting uneasy. And in the middle of an otherwise empty room is a cage. And in the cage are a bunch of mangled, bloodied, mutilated puppies and kittens. And the scientist goes to the cage, picks out one of the puppies, and begins to mutilate it. And you go, hey, whoa, like stop, what the hell are you doing? And the scientist explains to you, well, weirdly enough, when you torture puppies and kittens, they secrete an enzyme that enhances people's sense of taste. This is why this pill worked on you. This is why you got back your sense of taste and everything tasted better. So, my question to you is, do you tell them, all right, torture it, let me get my pills? Or do you say like, whoa, I don't want this? Who says that they still want it? Nobody says that they still want it. Which is good.
The puppy's meat, right?
What? No, nobody says that they still want it. I mean, like in all seriousness, like you're seeing a guy mutilate a puppy, you're not like gonna get cute.
Then how many people still drink Pepsi after they're finding out it's their flavor to feed themselves? You know?
Yeah, but it's not evil. In the same way. Anyway, so the thing is, the reason why you say that you won't, that you don't want the pills anymore, the reason why 99% of people say they don't want the pills anymore, is because at some point you value pain and suffering and life more than you value your tastes. And it's a thing that kind of everybody kind of ends up agreeing on. So, substitute puppies and kittens for chickens and cows and pigs, would you still take the pills? Probably still not. So you can stop taking the pills. You can stop torturing the puppies. You can stop eating meat. And that's how you can get around this problem. Is if you wouldn't continue taking the pills, you've already demonstrated that you care more about the suffering of an innocent being than you do about things that you think taste good. Which is good. That means you're an ethically intact person. It means you're not crazy. It means you're not evil. But it just means that you might need to reevaluate your priorities, and it means you might need to change up your lunch reservations for tomorrow. So, the average meat eater eats is responsible for roughly, like on average, about 200 deaths a year. That's 200 animals a year. So you are all holding over a lifetime it becomes thousands. In this room, cumulatively, it's tens of thousands. For all of humans, it's 60 billion a year. So every single person in this room holds the life, the pain, and the suffering of 200 innocent creatures at ransom on their dinner plate. Every single one of you, 200 lives per year. And you have a choice to make with them, what you can do with them. My question is, what if I had them all right here? Every single animal that you will be all the carnivores in here will be responsible for killing. I had them all here next to me, and they're staring at you, they're blinking, they're wagging their tails, they're looking cute, they're scratching their butts, they're doing what animals do. And you could either set them free, or you could kill them. And if you killed them, you'd get your meat for the year, but you would have to endure. You would have to see them all suffer. Well, would you set them free all at once? Not everybody says yes to this, but a lot of people do. Well, my question is, if you'd set them all free at once, why wouldn't you just do it one meal at a time? Because you can. There's no difference between if you'd save them all at one immediate time. You can do that. It just happens one meal at a time. You can save 200 lives. Would you do it? I think you should. My kind of final argument here is, and this is one that Justin kind of helped me to flesh out, and it's what we have happening in the slaughterhouses of America are atrocities just beyond comprehension. Again, if you've seen slaughterhouse videos, you know I'm not exaggerating. You know there's no conceivable way I could exaggerate. There's no conceivable way anybody could exaggerate. It is beyond horrific. And if you haven't seen these things and you eat meat, again, I think you just have the most basic moral obligation to know the pain you're complicit in. Well, imagine you're in 1940s Germany, and you're able to see a YouTube video of what's going on over in Austria. You're able to see a YouTube video. And you see it, and you know the pain that's going on. Your intuition says this is wrong, that you can't think of a good argument for why it's right. You have a moral obligation to step away from it and go, I can no longer participate in this. I'm not saying you have the moral obligation to go free the prisoners and risk your own life, but you have, at the very least, the obligation to step away and go, I'm going to wash my hands of this. This is disgusting. This is wrong. And everybody in here can do that. So, we harpoon whales through their brains. We club seals to death for accessories and gaudy clothing for rich old hags. We put animals with the same emotional intelligence as your beloved dog or cat in cages the same, just barely larger than their bodies, and string them up by their feet and slit their throats. And for what? We do this for a product that makes us poor, makes us fat, puts us at a greater risk for heart disease, hypertension, high blood pressure, cancer, destroys our environment, and ultimately cuts our life expectancy by up to 20%. But it tastes good. So, I am not a man that believes in heaven. That being said, I like to think that when you have the choice of whether or not to prevent the suffering of thousands of beings, the immense suffering, and you choose to do that at the expense of your own pleasure, that's an act noble enough to get you in. If there isn't a heaven, I think that the very least we can do is make it so that animals, innocent creatures like your dog or your cat, don't have to experience hell on earth. Thank you.
Indeed.